Good morning. My name is Phyllis Pollack, and I am a full-time mediator. I have a website, pgpmediation.com, and for the last decade or so, I have been posting a blog every Friday on it. But this time, I think I would like to do something different today, and I will want to provide a audio version of the blog. One of my recent blogs involves the words that we use. As you know, the words we say do matter and they can make a difference. And the blog that I've selected today for this audio reading is Us versus Them, or Is It We? Recently, I attended the annual conference of the Southern California Mediation Association, and one of the workshops I found to be very intriguing because it was all about the words we used. Entitled, quote, Words Matter, What to Leave at the Courthouse Steps, the speaker, Dr. Deborah Dupree and Harold Coleman, Jr., Esquire, discussed how important it is to consider the words we use, because the words we use in litigation really are antithetical to trying to resolve a matter. And their presentation reminded me of a saying by Ken Cloke, quote, there is no them, there is just us, end quote. Or to put it another way, there is no us versus them because we are indeed them and they are indeed us. Litigation or being involved in a dispute is adversarial. I think that is a given. And indeed, the word dispute itself is an adversarial term. But yet to resolve a matter or a, quote, difference of opinion, the parties must get out of this adversarial mindset and into one of we-ness, that is WENESS, or a mindset that we are all in this together and must work together as opposed to against each other to resolve the matter. And one of the ways to do this is to think about the words that we use and choose words that are inclusive rather than exclusive, or words that convey otherness, and to get out of our tribal mindset, that we are part of a tribe and they are others. For example, many lawyers, when they talk about litigating a case or going to trial, talk in terms of, quote, battle, end quote, or being, quote, at war, end quote. And indeed, when they prepare for trial, they create what is known as a, quote, war room, end quote, where they store all the evidence and everything else that they will need for trial. Why not simply call it the trial preparation room as opposed to the war room? And often these, quote, warriors, end quote, will try to settle a case days or weeks before the trial, yet they can't carry this mantle of war into the mediation. And often they will label the mediation as a hearing, which is adversarial, and call the mediator a, quote, officer, which again implicates a adversarial or a us versus them mindset. As we all know, the mediator decides nothing and is simply there to facilitate a resolution. And again, to label it as a, quote, hearing carries the notion of adversity into the process in which everyone should be working together as opposed to against each other. Instead, perhaps we should call a mediation a structured conference or a structured discussion, and a caucus rather as a private meeting or a one-on-one mediation. And often I've heard, during the mediation, when an attorney will speak to me, they will often refer to the other counsel as opposing counsel or the other side. And when referring to the other parties, they will talk about the plaintiff or the defendant or the cross-complainant or the cross-defendant. My question is, what's wrong with using their names? To erase adversity out of this situation, let's put some humanity into it and use the names of the people. So when we're talking about the plaintiff, let's call her either by her first name, Jane, or if we want to be more formal, say, Mrs. Smith. Same thing with the defendant, same thing with the cross-defendant or cross-complainant, use their names. Everyone likes being called their name. In fact, it's probably the sweetest thing that they like to hear, and they much prefer it to being called by a label. So, let's get rid of the labels. Let's be personable and not adversarial. And again, during a mediation, people will often make, quote, offers, end quote, or, quote, demands, or end quotes. Again, these words denote adversity in a us versus them mentality. Rather than use words such as offers and demands, why don't we use words such as proposals or suggestions or something similar? And if one party does decide to reject another's proposal, rather than saying something to the effect that the offer or demand is rejected and the counter offer or counter demand is X, says instead something to the effect of, I like your proposal, let me add to it by suggesting, quote, ABC, end quote. One thing I learned long ago is never to say, quote, yes, but, end quote, but to say, quote, yes, and, end quote. It's a lot less adversarial and is not nearly as dismissive of the other party's suggestions. The goal of most mediations is to find a solution that everyone can live with, or one that works for everybody. And to do this, the parties must work together rather than against each other. So in this brief video, I hope I've been able to show that words do matter, and the mindset in which we approach a mediation will indeed make the difference in terms of ending the, quote, difference of opinion or proceeding towards trial, otherwise known to some as war. It is important that we use words that acknowledge that we are all in this together. And as Ken Cloak said, that there is no us versus them, because indeed we are them. So anyway, that is just something to think about. And I hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much for listening.